I would like to welcome all of you, the resource personnel and the participants who have joined with us to follow this webinar. And this webinar, which is the second of the series of the pre-AGM webinar series, is on climate risk management, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development, which is a very, very topical area in today's context. And we have two international resource personnel with us. And I would introduce them later formally. And we are so happy that, we were able to source them to bring global experience in this very important field to this webinar and to the discussion. So before we, to start the webinar, we are very grateful to our sponsors, INSEE EcoCycle, and we would like to show a small video clip of them, and then we can go to the technical sessions.
INSEE has been operating its waste management arm, INSEE EcoCycle, since 2003. With global expertise in waste management, at INSEE EcoCycle, we provide sustainable environmental solutions to manage industrial waste of your organization. We are the premium waste solution services provider in Sri Lanka with the scheduled waste management license to collect, transport, process, and eliminate hazardous and non-hazardous industrial waste safely. We act in line with the national environmental protection and quality regulations, while complying with international health and safety standards. Being part of the region's largest waste management business, we provide a multitude of services to waste generators, from waste profiling to waste treatment. We currently extend us along with government institutions in Sri Lanka. Verify its chemical and physical composition with the previously agreed specifications. Our pre-processing facility treats different waste streams using a series of customized technologies to produce a homogeneous material compatible for co-processing in the cement kiln. EcoCycle's waste analytical laboratories in Putlam and Katunayaka are built to strengthen the pre-processing quality control of the waste materials fed entry. INSEE EcoCycle is awarded numerous local and global certifications. By joining hands with us, you contribute to the country's sustainable development and to make Sri Lanka waste-free. Together, we strive to protect, preserve, and restore the environment for the next generation.
Thank you very much for that video presentation. And I would like to invite our president of the Institute, Mr. H.S. Semchandra, to give a small opening remark to the webinar today. Mr. Premchandra, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Hemantha Ranasinghe. Good evening to you all. I think it is my responsibility to welcome all of you, give some opening remarks before the actual presentation starts. On behalf of IEPSL, Institute of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka, let me welcome all of you to the webinar today, Climate Risk Management, Disaster Risk Reduction and Sustainable Development. Mr. Horst Primus from Germany and Mr. Dr. Madhav Kaki from Nepal will be our resource person today. And I really appreciate their generosity to accept our invitation, and their presence also really appreciated. On behalf of the IEPSL, let me welcome especially both of you as resource persons. Also, I would like to welcome our participants today, and also our moderator, Professor Hemantha Ranasinghe, former president of IEPSL, and the senior professor of environment and forestry, University of Sri Javadhanapura, Sri Lanka. As the chairperson of IEPSL, I really appreciate the efforts by the organizers of this seminar, Mr. Suraj Vanyarachi, our council member, and Dr. Wahala, our editor, and also the the chairman of the Sri Lanka Accreditation Board and the editor of IPSL, Dr. Wahala, and also Mr. Rishan, our council member. And I also really appreciate the work done by our Honorary Secretary Ajit Atugal, Mr. Ajit Atugal, and our Executive Secretary, Piyumi Dedigamo. As you already know, this webinar is the second webinar in the series of the seminars prior to the AGM, which is to be conducted on 26th January. And at this point, let me appreciate the generous financial support by our main sponsor, EcoCycle, pioneers in total waste management solution in Sri Lanka. They are always really helpful for us, give a lot of support for the conduction of this type of training and awareness programs. And also, I really appreciate the other support, financial support given by the other co-sponsors. Firstly, Plastica International, which is one of the WHO approved medical instrument manufacturer in Sri Lanka under CMI, and also other co-sponsor, Ceylon Waste Management Limited. Also the support given by our media sponsor, Vijay Newspapers through Sunday Times is really appreciated. If I speak few words about the theme of the seminar today, of course, need to promote sustainable development by reducing the vulnerability associated with climate risk. Here, climate sensitive decisions making is very, very important. We have to maximize positive outcomes. We have to minimize negative outcomes for the society. In this case, areas like agriculture, food security, water resources, health, etc. are very, very important. We have to take broad range of actions, including early response systems, strategic diversifications, dynamic resource allocation rules, financial instruments such as climate risk insurance, infrastructure design that suits to these situations, and also capacity building to address all the problems related to this climate risk management and disaster risk reduction. If we talk something about the disaster risk reduction, actually it needs a systematic approach to identify and also to assess and also to reduce risk of these disasters. We should aim to reduce socioeconomic vulnerabilities to disasters as well as dealing with environmental and other hazards associated. Therefore, countries like Sri Lanka, these aspects are very, very important. We are a very environmentally sensitive country, an island of course. We are experiencing a lot of some small scale, medium scale, at times large scales, bad climate situations, and also some disasters. I'm not going to details, but our resource persons will address on these issues. Of course, relief agencies, there are relief agencies related and also development agencies related to this topic. They have direct responsibilities. In disaster risk reduction, of course, disaster risk reduction is much broader than general emergency management. We all can understand that it is beyond conventional emergency management. In sustainable development goals, disaster risk reduction policy is very, very vital. Each country should have disaster risk reduction policies and also disaster risk management aspects, protocols or procedures. These two are very, very compulsory in national development goals. I think I am not going to details. I'm not going to talk more about this topic. And before wind up my small speech, let me tell something about our institute. Institute of Environment Professionals Sri Lanka is the umbrella organization for the environment professional in the country. We initiated our activities in 2006, and actually we got the full legal status from the government of Sri Lanka recently. Now we are a fully legalized body, and we are the most prominent and most popular environment professional organization in the country. We are happy to say that by now we have more than 750 members, including around 100 charter members. Awareness, education and training like this are the one of our major activities. We recently concluded few webinars successfully focusing various subjects. You know, we are facing with this corona pandemic constraints. Our first seminar in this year, last year, was the new normal approach in the aftermath of corona pandemic, and it was very well conducted and very well attended. And we had another seminar on biodiversity and another seminar on sewage and wastewater treatment. All these seminars were really appreciated by participants and well attended. Our institute is committed to extending professionalism. Of course, our main aim is to uplift the standards of our environmental professionals in the country, so that there will be a great high quality service to the general public in the country. Finally, it will have a great impact on the sustainable development of our country. We have especially we focus on environmental advocacy, professionalism, training, and of course, empowerment. Lastly, may I announce that I think already our moderator announced, our 13th AGM will be conducted on 26th this month. We have the focus on importance of safeguarding environment for national development. It's a very timely topic. You know, we always see a lot of contentious environmental issues throughout the country day by day. When we watch TVs, when we go to the YouTube, when we search to the internet and Facebook, we see a lot of contentious environmental issues being happening throughout the country. Our AGM, before the AGM, we will address some other topics also, like climatic change, industry sustainability, environmental impact assessment, and waste management before the AGM on 26th. With these few words, let me wind up my welcoming and opening remarks. And I welcome all of you once again. I wish you a very fruitful seminar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Premchandra, for that introduction to the topic as well as to the Institute. So with this very informed setting, I would like to introduce our speakers today. So just a moment. So we have two resource personnel, Engineer Horst Kremers from Berlin, Germany, who is an engineer and information scientist. His special interest is in applied digital semiotics in connection with full management aspects for applications and control. He's an expert in databases, active information systems, disaster prevention, risk reduction, process modeling, applied semiotics, geoinformation systems, environmental information systems, and engineering management. He's a coordinator of CoData Network, which promotes global collaboration to advance open science and improve the availability and usability of data for all areas of research. And he's a coordinator for Germany. So he'll be talking today about information infrastructure facilitation for environmental disaster risk reduction due to climate change. Yes, as you all know, we need to have accurate data collected in a standardized manner so that we could do our predictions, especially with regard to predicting climate change vulnerabilities. This is extremely important. So in this context, I would like to welcome and request host Kremers to start his presentation. Over to you, host.
Yeah. Thank you, Hemanti. First of all, I thank the President Premachandra and the President-elect Nyanya for this possibility to join these discussions in your country. And I'm very happy that so many people attend our meetings. Among them, let me just welcome a few of those who are very far away from you. That is Monika Jarosch, for instance. She's vice president of CODATA Germany, the German National Committee for the International Science Council Committee on Data. And we also have with us today in the audience Rachida Hussa from Morocco, West Africa, and Ekaterini Pusturli, risk specialist in Belgium. So let me take my screen for you. That is this one, and oops. Yeah. Let me talk today about information management in support of operational tasks in sustainable development and disaster reduction. This presentation will be made available for you. I submitted the links in the chat. And so that keeps me short in time because I don't have to read all the text of my slides. Let me just make some remarks on my presentation so far. This is just order about the topics that I'm going to talk about. This, as Hemanti Ranasinghe said, my specialty is applied semiotics. Now, this is semiotics is sometimes thought it's a philosophical term. No, it's just the main structure of science, and the world is in syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. That goes automatic. Sorry. So that is about the syntax, the meaning, and pragmatics. That is the action space that has to be modeled. I think this is just what we want, not just having the data of a certain situation, but also to see what the action means in this. And then we go for management principles in general that are behind this. My structure today is I want to talk a little bit about Sustainable Development Goals and the related United Nations instruments. So I come from top down, and the information management and complexity behind that. Selected challenges, there are much more, but I touch a few just for the discussion to raise issues. And in the end, some recommendations for action. The United Nations instruments. Instruments is the official term in United Nations for all those transnational declarations, conventions, treaties, frameworks, and directives, and so on. It's just a list of those that are coming together. Now we are working here with quite a different set, but nevertheless, the UN Convention on the Rights of Child, of course, the right of children to shape our future or something that also I want to touch. It can be and should be in the sense of United Nations. It should be some part of the discussion, and of course, disability and development belong together. From the history, that is nice because I myself I had the pleasure of coming into the discussion of shaping these topics from the early days of the 90s with the Rio Earth Summit, where we had 20 years right a few last year, and this environmental domain together with the risk domain. And since the same time, here's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the habitat, for instance, that are the main pillars of those risk-informed sustainable development activities that belong together. Now, these pillars itself, each of them is a little bit complicated. Nevertheless, we have to do the same things, and we are obliged to discuss about how to put this complexity, which is real world complexity, is not just methods, how to put that together for action and support of our environment. Now, these United Nations instruments call for a paradigm shift towards an impact-based, risk-informed and multi-hazard integration approach. There were years, you see, I worked in environmental information since the late 80s. There was years where we were happy to document what is the environment and then discuss about it. But now we are obliged to do impact-based, risk-informed integration approach, and that means that our complexity is much more larger. So it's not only from the environmental topics, there are also cross-organizational difficulties behind that. Today, I don't want to go into these difficulties, but every one of you working in this field will observe that it's nice and important to observe the environment, but when you see the organizational structure behind that, that is a complexity by itself, which doesn't make it too easy. It's not just a science problem. It's a all day, all actors, all supporters problem. Cooperation with the private sector, of course, industries, companies, organizations, from tourists to professional environmental agencies to business process in general. They are involved because we are talking about also big environmental risks that, of course, treat and have these. We're talking about disaster losses of environmental and climate disasters, and of course, these are also involved there. Especially, we are concerned about business continuity management because that keeps our world running, and we see now with the pandemic how these interruptions, that is in the health domain, how these interruptions touch our everyday life. We need a holistic approach, and that is my problem, and maybe some support to see what comes on top of that. Now, from the text, this is just an excerpt of 25 pages text of the Sendai Declaration for Disaster Risk Reduction. And I just want to go there. These yellow marks is one of the many marks in that paper I made for me to indicate on information problems behind this. And I just want to highlight that we have economic, social, health, education, environmental, and cultural heritage impacts. And as I saw from the Sri Lanka National Adaptation Plan, all these topics, of course, are of your national concern, and that is kind of the context of the whole thing. Now we go a little bit more in information management and its complexity. Basic management principles come from management in general, which is sometimes not really the topic of the normal scientist. Of course, there are also scientists doing a very big management task. Nevertheless, from the top to the bottom, and especially to see that it is focused also in the adaptation plans and in the strategies and in the roadmaps, that management principles could be enhanced a little bit better. I don't want to go through all of them, but I want to start or mention in the set only these extensive documentation and reporting obligations that have to be written down. Extensive documentation. I start in my presentation sometimes with, did you ever see a documentation of a disaster? No. We have parts of disaster documentation and we have parts of the discussion. At moment, there is not a slight idea internationally also, and certainly not nationally, to have a so-called standard documentation of a disaster. Certain actors do their documentation, but we don't have that together at hand for decision making. We're giving parts of information for decision making, but we don't have such extensive documentation. Just for one point in all this. Establishing cross-organizational information infrastructures. No, that is what a lot of people, especially here in Europe, I say, which could be some export of knowledge also in technical and operational way, also to other countries like yours. We in Europe there was a good national activities, for instance, with the Inspire directive, to have a law, a so-called directive would be a directive has to be implemented in national laws in all Europe, and that makes all these things in a technical sense mandatory. Not just a wish, not just a plan, but to have, as your people also with administration background know that the whole thing works much more straightforward when you somewhere write, yes, it is administratively mandatory, because that is when the agencies also get the money, get the personnel, and whatsoever they have to, they can claim for something that is legally mandatory, is much more easy than to promote and implement all these things. Please read the details later in the download PDF. Selected domains and organizations of current interoperability best practice. I thought about I spoke about the UNEP digital transformation toward global data strategy. Oh, there's a new line missing. The European Union Inspire directive, and see my presentations, my publications for links to that. This is really a big standards, especially for basic data. Geoinformation, there is especially the Open GIS Consortium, OGC, internationally active. The Observational Health Data Science and Informatics, OHDSI, and so on. Biodiversity and Earth observations and everything. Now we have interoperability there. The thing is that also this does not work everything together, and there is a little bit overlap. And of course, there is some good use of coordination and choreography of using data, and that is very helpful for further going on, but we're far from the end of all solutions. Elements of information management. What are we talking about? This is certainly important, because we do not please only talk about what general people call values. That is something like a list of numbers or something like that. Now, everyone nowadays knows we have to take some meta information about that. That is the meaning of this data. What is behind that? How did you measure it? What is the precision? What is the quality issues behind that? Nevertheless, also what we do and we handle these data is with methods, functions, processes, models, measures, principles, expectations, actors, and their sociology. Well, these actors and their sociology, that is, what are you doing with it? And how do the actors cooperate to do that? The documentation I mentioned, we make decisions, actions, effects, and control. Now, these are what I call facts in information management, all these together, not just the values. And these decision, actions, effects, and control, of course, need documentation themselves. Again, we are far from having a standard or even not best practice, officially best practice documentation principles of this. So we can do something good in that. In consequence, we should be in this information infrastructure should enable operational complexity. We need that complexity operational in this sense, and that is a document why it is even from the information side absolutely complex. but we have to get that in start. We are engineers. We don't fear complexity. And if you have complexity in data, don't talk about tsunami of information, but just ask your engineer, ask your computer scientist and data specialist. We can help you with that complexity. Improvement of transparency, avoidance of misinterpretation, and essentially speeding up of alternatives and decisions. The kind of alternatives of all what has been done and decided. There is a poor situation sometimes that the alternatives, which is very rich in discussions, because there's pros and cons discussed, and why not go this way? Why not use that function? That is, sorry, it's sometimes not documented at all. In final support of accountability, this is words of the United Nations. This is not just an idea, but in the end, those acting in one way or other are accountable for some part of the whole process. And that is what is even United Nations supporting in the text of their instruments. The participatory inclusion and leave no one behind is also general principle from United Nations. Just a short excursion on facts algebraic properties, which sometimes I feel is a little bit missing. The questions of completeness, the questions of continuity, what is the parameter spaces doing about differentiability? Is that smooth, or are there steps in the data? Isotropy, does that information is it the same to spread in all directions in the same? Is it in one direction? Is it going statistically in turmoil or whatsoever? So that is algebraic property, and also in holonomy, you see that is kind of transform of fact sets properties, where say just for a simple example, that is you make some aggregation, you aggregate, and then you deaggregate, and are you sure to get the same data in the end again? So this kind of transformation of our fact sets also has to be taken by. So if you have the possibility, take some mathematicians also in your team. For the information infrastructure ontology, I want to be short here, that we are talking about the representation of the ontology, some semantic mapping, say some other semantic models, and in principle it should be input here. The pragmatic models, the action models also have to be mentioned here. Now we have the consistency problems, explicitness, degree of detail, decisions, precision, completeness, coherence, and consistency. Coherence is something that is cross data set, cross programs, cross disciplines. The complexity challenge then is about the dynamics of facts, that all what I said about even the kind of documentations, the decisions. Once the decisions is taken, even especially in disaster time, it's very dynamic, and all that facts have a dynamics of their own, but we are far from having models for this. Dynamics of context, the complexity of actors, the complexity of organizations, and the complexity of ecosystems interdependence. Then from information infrastructure side, we need ways of capturing and data analysis. Documentation I mentioned, data-driven understanding of our world, decision-making support. That is, I talked about thresholds, signals, and triggers. That is what we are looking for, but there have to be negotiations for this. You wouldn't believe a single person saying, no, from this on, we have a disaster. Maybe that has to be agreement when we call it and make it official, and so on. So if in the end also discuss about the effects and consequences of what we do. This is, I want to go short, but this is just to say what in what application fields we are going there. That is from there is a list of the first session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly on the United Nations Environmental Program in about 2 years ago. The UN declarations increasingly enforce the demands for coherence and mutual synergy. So what we do in one field, sometimes people had been working in silos. There are no such silos anymore. No, you will say, I'm optimistic, you see, but if you see such silos, please ask your colleagues to come together and work across these silos for mutual coherence and mutual synergies. Also with the information, not only in phrasing strategies, but also in the implementation of data. Not all data can be used cross-domain nowadays because there are totally different definitions about the same name of data. So it also wouldn't help to put all these data in a big cloud, because in the cloud it may be easy to access, but you don't have automatic coherence of these data. Yeah, timeliness implementation is in the interest of the future of people and planet. I say this is not just a technical term, do it or not, but it's what information management is for future of people and planet. And in the end, we should also improve coherence for information society at large. Selected challenges, just to mention a few. Now, this is a national, I copied from the nationally determined contributions that you already defined in Sri Lanka on mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and a means of implementation. Now, this list is fantastic, of course. I just want to mention at that time, it would be necessary, in my sense, it would be necessary for implementation, it would be necessary to make a real map of these blocks of text into information system details. Now, this is not done easily, and then you would have a kind of information structure scheme. Then you can implement it in structural formal way, but it has to be done, and it's not necessarily only the task of those existing specialists, but maybe because the task is complex, sufficiently complex, they work together with informatics specialists and data specialists. Would be kind of something that is really would be good. Now, in that way, the Warsaw International Mechanism is mentioned, which approaches to address loss and damage associated with the adverse effects of climate change by undertaking following functions: enhancing knowledge, strengthening dialogue, and enhancing action and support. Now, this is also more easily said than done, and also here some mapping is into information space is missing. So we are in the information domain for just to mention another space is United Nations Decade on Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. The United Nations General Assembly has endorsed the outcomes for the Decade of Ocean Sciences, which started this year: a clean ocean, healthy ocean, productive ocean. From this, only one tiny aspect, but it's basic, is the maps, the gaps, activities, the kind of mapping the ocean bottoms worldwide, which is really a task. And I just want to indicate that workshop is going on all this week, and it's virtually from Paris, France, and everyone can join this discussion for the oceans. Recommendations for action, just a few. Besides multi-stakeholder inclusion and discussions in the development of strategies, stakeholder inclusion, not just in the first discussions, but stakeholder inclusion in the governance aspect, or which governance is a permanent tool in the whole process, and the multi-stakeholder principles should be valid for the whole process. Negotiate for standards and so on. Just let me take you for this for reading afterwards. The relevant stakeholders themselves should include women, children and youth, persons with disabilities, poor people, migrants, indigenous people, the community of practitioners, older persons, and don't forget to talk with data journalists and the media, because and that should be principles. That is not just by come to have or not or something. If you better write it in your implementation activity plan, then it will be not forgotten during all that work. Recommendations also is data management plans. In some of the investigations, because they are research oriented mainly, there are data management plans maybe already available. These data management plans have to be made a mandatory principle in all these things, and not just have a plan and then forget about it, but also these management plans should be part of a permanent repository of information for our purposes. Find flagship actors. That is what you're doing in Sri Lanka already. I read it. And match with other national and international strategies supporting digitalization. You see, the world is full of digitization aspects nowadays. So use this kind of support that comes from totally different corners of the world. It's not environmentalists themselves, but everyone is nowadays supporting and giving money for digitization in general. Enable steps in the direction of institutionalizing participative governance. Audit against the full requirements of UN instrument text. Now, let me just mention this here. Audit against the full requirements of UN instrument text. There is sometimes reduction of the discussion, and we are just talking about certain important but aspects. But where are the less important aspects? What is a society doing with all that things that are so-called less important, that didn't make it in the first group of the topics? Sometimes you have to audit against UN instrument text, because that is very interesting, and it does not generalize too much. And in the Sendai framework way, we have so many details, but this auditing is very good. And for instance, some of you, and I know Hemanti Ranasinghe also has experience in working in auditing things, and that is very important for me. So thank you that I could mention that. Activities, recommendations. We have communities, and that is, for instance, the RIMA community, risk information management, risk models and applications. You can join these discussions. We have a risk information list where we send messages around about what we're doing and what is interesting in documents, events, and so on. And we have a blog to join there. So that is something which you are really invited to join. And the topic of our session today is sustainable development, and this information management there. And there we have another similar homepage and community for supporting discussion about sustainable development information. Let me close with calling the data revolution, which is not my idea. You see, I'm not really a revolutionarist myself, but I support it sometimes. But I'm not political. You see, I'm technician, and I would look for technical revolution. Ultimately, more empowered people, better policies, better decisions, account for leading to better outcomes for people and planet. This has been the words and the strategies of Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations Secretary General, a few years ago. I thank for your attention. I have some more information behind that presentation you can read, and we absolutely would like to stay in contact for the discussion. Here we maybe have some questions which I'm eager to answer if it's possible, and also to start working together after this whole seminar. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, host, for that very informative presentation. There are a lot of questions in the chat box, which we'll deal later during the discussion. So I would like to invite our second speaker for today, Dr. Madhav Kaki. Dr. Madhav Kaki is an expert in environmental and natural resource management, climate change, and sustainable development. He is the Deputy Chair, IUCN, Commission on Ecosystem Management. Some of the previous positions held by him were Deputy Director General, Semiotics, Senior Program Officer, IDRC, Canada, and Assistant and Acting Dean, Institute of Forestry, Nepal. So he'll be talking about ecosystem-based, nature-based solutions approach to disaster risk reduction, which is actually called EcoDRR. So over to you, Dr. Madhav.
Thank you, Dr. Hemanti. Respected guests, moderator, Dr. Hemanti, Mr. Itugala, and distinguished participants. Very good evening and good afternoon. Thank you to the organizer for this opportunity. I will be now sharing my screen. Let me see if this will be polished. So just give me a second. I will be. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see that. You can put your slideshow mode.
Yeah, I have put it. Have you seen it?
Still, it's not on the slideshow mode. We can see the slides.
Yeah,
Slideshow.
I did put slideshow.
Now
It's not there. Oh, okay. So let me see. Let me try one more time. So this is share screen and
share screen slideshow.
Yeah. Then I go from slideshow. Okay, can you see it?
No, not yet. We can see only you. You have to share the screen. Yeah, you share the screen. I mean, what you did earlier was okay.
Oh, okay, just a minute. I think the other one. Share.
Yeah. You have shared your screen. That's fine. Yeah, you just go ahead. No problem.
Okay. So as Dr. Hemanti has already introduced me, I will not talk about me, but the topic I'm going to talk on is role of ecosystem and nature-based approaches and solutions in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. IUCN recently released the global standards for nature-based solutions. So I hope you all are familiar. Talking about ecosystem-based approaches, I will be basically talking about ecosystem-based adaptation and disaster risk reduction, eco-DRR. So these are the points I will be covering in my presentation. I will talk about the context. I will go really rapidly. Environment and development challenges South Asia is facing, and then interlinkages between DRR, adaptation, sustainable development, ecosystem-based approaches, nature-based solution, and lessons from South Asian and Southeast Asian countries also. And in fact, that will be, I hope, relevant to Sri Lanka. So you must all be quite familiar that global mean temperature, which is now at this stage has increased by 1 degree, might hit 5.8 degree by the end of the century. And then we have sea level rise, we have retreating glaciers and polar ice, which also impacts sea level rise, and climate extremes, including flood, which are very important for South Asia. In 2020, only the floods and I would say the ocean, I would say the storms have affected, displaced more than 12 million people. And these are the trend from different sources. All trend shows that we are heading to Earth, which is more 4 degrees Celsius warmer. Some other challenges South Asia is facing in terms of the sustainable development is, of course, poverty, inequality, environment degradation.
I can't see the screen.
Can you see the screen? Then we have population growth and very fast rate of urbanization, poor governance and ineffective institutions, poor and imbalanced infrastructure, which means infrastructure which are actually aiding to climate change, which are aiding to greenhouse gas emissions, and knowledge capacity technology gaps. In environment sector, of course, we have loss of biodiversity. You all have heard the recent IEPSL global assessment report indicated close to 1 million species are at the risk of extinction. We have water security threatened. We have air, water, and land pollution, ocean pollution. We have degraded, all ecosystems are degraded. Then climate change vulnerability increasing. And in fact, South Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions from climate change perspective. But South Asia also has very low resources in terms of per capita agricultural land and forest land, as you can see the figures. The estimate of the damage which will be contributed by climate change and other disasters in South Asia is actually quite huge. You can see that by 2030, percentage of GDP, Sri Lanka, you can see the blue means flood is going to affect the GDP very heavily. The climate change is a major threat to rare, endangered, and threatened floras and faunas. Both terrestrial and marine ecosystem will be affected. And as I said, climate change is one of the major factors which is contributing to the biodiversity loss. Climate change is also expected to impact food security. South Asia, according to the IFRI, International Food Policy Research Institute, is expected to have yield decline of up to 18 to 22.1% as compared to the global figure of almost close to 1%. So the South Asia comparatively will be very largely affected by climate change in terms of food and nutrition security, as South Asia is expected to experience higher temperature rise between 246 and 2065 due to 4 degree Celsius increase is expected. So there will be negative impact on both food production and consumption. The consumption pattern will be also changed because the meat production, especially those countries, and Sri Lanka, I guess, also consumes quite a fair amount of meat. They will facing higher prices of meat as due to climate change. Unsustainable human activities combined with climate change is leading land degradation. As you must have read the land degradation report of the IEPSL, which is estimating close to $3 billion loss annually due to land degradation. Land degradation also causes agrobiodiversity loss, which is one of the highest in South Asia. So you can, and in terms of forestry, forest situation, and Sri Lanka is one of the, I think, forest-rich countries. Ecosystem services are expected to decline. If we take high growth scenario, high economic growth scenario, then conservation of biodiversity will decline, watershed values will decline, landscape and amenity values will remain, so carbon sequestration will increase. And low growth also, you can see that the figures are watersheds will degrade, landscape will degrade. And of course, if you have a green economy, which means if we switch to green economy, then we will have positive impact. So this calls for that if you really improve forest cover and forest quality, you're going to get better biodiversity, and you will also adapt to climate change better. So this brings to adapting to climate change, why it is necessary. In fact, this is inevitable that we have to adapt. It makes development more resilient. Almost all development inputs are climate sensitive in development sectors like agriculture, forestry, water, biodiversity, health. So these sectors need to be made resilient. That is viable solutions. For example, climate smart agriculture, ecosystem-based adaptation makes agriculture and forestry more resilient. Green economic strategies where we switch from fossil fuel-based economy to more clean energy-based economy helps environment, or it also helps mitigate climate change. So good environment governance and nature-based solution can build resilience. So this means that we need to mainstream ecosystem, we need to mainstream biodiversity, a larger, broader environment in development. It is difficult, but necessary options. As you all know that world is talking about business as usual is not an option. We have to think different options. So environment, climate change, economic development, and development cooperation are politically sensitive and complex issue. There are intricate linkages as Rio, the Declaration 92, Rio +20, outcome, and other global, I would say, MEAs, they all indicate these interlinkages. Development is suggested by Rio +20, the future we want, as you may have already known. So learning from the South Asia regions, I think, provides some good example, because South Asia, in terms of managing a forest, definitely the forest cover has increased. It is one of the, I would say, success stories. I would say that which we can all be proud of, because forest cover in most of the countries have increased. So the nature-based solutions, this is why it is important, and it's important for South Asia. It's important for Sri Lanka, because we really respect nature. Our culture, ethos, and values, they all respect nature. This is so the IUCN has been working on this nature-based solutions since 2016, when the definition of the nature-based solution was accepted by the Congress. And the definition says actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystem which address societal challenges effectively and adaptively while simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity. So this is something which is kind of a win-win solution. Of course, there are challenges, and it is an umbrella concept. And after the motion was accepted in 2016, now IUCN officially launched the NBS in July 2020, and global standards were released in November 2020. So the NBS principle says that nature conservation have to be embraced by development, which means development has to say conservation and development are not actually not necessarily has to bring trade-offs. So it's both can be simultaneously run and synergistically. Principle 2 says you have to implement project in an integrated manner. For example, integrated watershed management. Similarly, the NBS is a site-specific and natural and cultural context. So every society can customize nature-based solutions. It is a broad umbrella solution, which societies of which every country can sort of tailor it to its needs. It produces societal benefits in a fair and equitable manner because it also addresses the need of the marginal community, disadvantaged community. Principle 5 says biological culture diversity is promoted. 6 says it works at seascape and landscape level. And principle 7, it addresses trade-offs, which often occurs when you do poverty reduction and biodiversity conservation. One increases, other decreases. But I think it is possible if you do work synergistically, then you can have full range of ecosystem services which can be had. So this concept, what are these concepts? What are the tools under these concepts? As I said, it is an umbrella concept. So there are kind of almost a menu of options for you. Socio-ecological restoration, bioengineering, forest landscape restoration, ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based disaster reduction, risk reduction, green infrastructure building approaches, integrated coastal zone management. We have, for example, reach to reef for the island countries, ecosystem-based management, and protected area management. So area-based conservation approaches. Now, these are all familiar with you, but I think what NatureBased Solutions says is that these approaches have to be planned in a holistic, participatory, inclusive manner. And the opportunity for South Asia is that, of course, South Asia, including Sri Lanka, has been practicing integrated watershed management for quite some time. So nature-based solution actually can very much can be scaled up using our watershed success stories. Similarly, we have mountain EBA, we have coastal EBAs, there are several EBA projects in all the countries of South Asia. This is another nature-based solution. Payment for ecosystem services, this is also ongoing for many years. You all must be familiar that there are several projects which are PACE. For example, IFAD has a project called RUPACE, rewarding upland poor for their ecosystem services. So there are different names, but I think the idea is that ecosystem services ecosystem service providers are rewarded. Similarly, we have another NBS, which is called Ecosystem Management Protects Infrastructure and Communities. This project was run in Nepal and several other countries, and is another very successful approach. Mainstreaming eco-DRR and EBA in national policies and plans. Dr. Host talked about Sendai framework. Sendai framework, if you Paris Climate Agreement and all of sustainable development goals, they all talk ecosystem-based approaches. So these are already mainstreamed in global MEAs, and this is why this NBS is already globally accepted. European Union has already accepted it in its program. So we have another ecosystem-based approaches. It's like the red list of species, but now we have a red list of ecosystems. and it tries to address the question, which ecosystem are most at risk of large detrimental changes? How do risks to ecosystem change over time? How will alternative policy and management options can reduce ecosystem risk? This has been practiced in several countries, and IUCN, especially our commission, is working on this to bring to South Asia how we can do red listing of ecosystem. So how ecosystem-based approaches can help build resilience by improving adaptive capacity or improving adaptation, reducing sensitivity, that means reducing vulnerability. So this is what we can say. So ecosystem-based activities maintain and restore critical forest watershed, protect and restore forest economical, cultural, and environmental values, which means environmental, the ecosystem value, ecological values can be protected. It enhances availability of ecosystems of goods and services, for example, provisional services, regulating services, and cultural services. Supports indigenous and local knowledge and good practices so that you can have very contextual adaptation activities planned. It maintains maintains connectivity among the fragmented ecosystem and fragmented habitats. And it enhances natural risk averting, which means enhances the buffering capacity, natural capacity of ecosystem to adapt to climate change. In Nepal, together with ECMOD, we conducted economic analysis of EVA options and engineering options for climate change adaptation in one of the watershed. And the key findings was we can have different adaptation options, ecosystem-based adaptation option, engineering option, catchment area options, and then hybrid option, where we start with the engineering option, but then we reinforce it with the ecosystem-based approaches. And economic analysis indicated that the best cost benefit ratio is obtained if you have this either ecosystem-based approaches or the hybrid approaches. So what it does is that it protects the community resources, it avoids the damage, and it enhances ecosystem services, and it reduces costs. So it is kind of a more robust approaches where we combine both ecosystem and engineering approaches. And this, I think, works for good for DIR. So I also reviewed many EVA projects, and lessons learned is healthy forests. They maintain forest, ecosystem services, and ecosystem services functions and structures are improved. Knowledge gap in future climate impacts on both ecosystem and system, of course, is an issue, but sustainable forest management can be sort of ecosystem-based sustainable forest management through capacity enhancement has sort of shown good results. But it also shows that it's not only ecosystem-based approaches, but it's community-based approaches and disaster risk reduction, which if we combine it, they will work better, because all our human-centered ecosystem goods and services are utilized by all these tools, and they all work at different scales, so they can be scaled up, and they address the complexity, recognize the local specificity, and they follow integrated approaches. So that this means that they are compatible, and this is why IUCN and Commission on Ecosystem Management, we have combined EBA and DRR, and we call it ECO-DRR. So this hybrid option, which I was talking about, was that it takes both short and medium and long-term view of adaptation. For example, if you do reforestation conservation, then it takes some time for the vegetation to establish. So you can start with engineering option, but then you can reinforce with the ecosystem approach. And this way, then sustainability resiliency can be of the engineering structures can be ensured. And of course, these have to be tailored according to the local needs. You can see that you can start with engineering options, but then ecosystem approaches take over, and this way resilience is built. So some of the lessons I will go rather rapidly. For these are the recommendations, so to say, for the participants. So transboundary, cross-border approaches are required for both climate change and biodiversity conservation. For example, I think Sri Lanka and India, you are cooperating on our way. I see that ecosystem management can be used as an approach to conservation and adaptation, promoting transboundary seascape conservation and livelihood development. For example, fishery is very important for both the coastal communities in both the countries. If we can take into account the social, economic, and cultural co-benefits of coastal conservation and development, I think we can conserve the biodiversity, but also promote adaptation. Experience from this region, RED Plus, Sri Lanka also has RED Plus. So focus on payment for ecosystem services, of course, focus on payments is there, but I think the co-benefits or along with the payments for the carbon, the biodiversity and sustainable development, for example, the development, the inclusive development through income enhancement of women communities, poor, I think that also works, that sort of helps RED Plus work better in our experience. We also feel that using a traditional and scientific, integrating these two knowledge system can help build resilience and promote the adaptation. Improving livelihood through value chain development and high value products and services, where we really take high value non-timber forest products and then you link to market but you also improve the quality of the products by building capacity of the community, also improves adaptation. Similarly, integrated watershed management can generate multiple benefits. You have long experience in your Mahaveli watershed, Mahaveli basin. So this increases ecosystem services and also enhances water supply and energy. Multi-stakeholder partnership. I think partnership among government bodies, law enforcement agencies, civil society, CBOs can help for forest protection because protecting forests can help for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Promoting carbon compatible development. I think Sri Lanka, you have blue economy as well as I hope you also are talking about green economy, wherein I think the solar energy and wind energy and biomass energy are promoted to replace fossil fuel. And of course, blue economy, you have tourism and recreation. So Sri Lanka is fortunate that it can promote both the economy and address climate change. Capacity building, of course, means of implementation. When UN bodies talk about it, capacity building comes often. Capacity building will be key for addressing climate change adaptation, sustainable development, because the adaptive capacity, if we can enhance, it can reduce vulnerability. Dr. Prem talked about information infrastructure, which is much needed for decision support system, and it's critical for disaster risk reduction, because in disaster risk reduction, we need to see that information flows faster than water. That means that real-time information sharing is critical for disaster risk reduction. Integrated water river basin management. I think the river are really very important. I would say the waterscapes, and they have water which is critical for adapting to climate change. But I think if we just let a river to be managed for water, and we do not do for the freshwater ecosystem, and also we do not manage the watershed for maintaining the clean water, then the river system cannot help to adapt to climate change. So improving water governance and conservation is important. Integrated management of watershed and the integrated management of rivers based on ecosystem landscape approaches would be very, very important. Engaging our media and youth is very, very important. As South Asia, I think we have more than close to half of our population. They are young generation, and without their support, we cannot achieve adaptation resilience. And finally, knowledge management and communication. Climate risk information is very critical. We have knowledge gap, we have information gap, we have data gap. So we need to fill these data gaps constantly, and this will help national adaptation, sustainable development priorities and policies. If we have right kind of information, right kind of knowledge, we can help policymakers plan better policies. And of course, information have to be communicated in a tailored manner so that they are tailored according to their stakeholders' needs, according to the audience needs. So finally, to conclude, ecosystem and nature-based solutions are transformative tools. Now, we are talking about transformative solutions. Transformative solutions are not business as usual solutions. They are a solution wherein we want to replace broken infrastructure and then ineffective institutions, or we want to re-engineer or kind of invigorate. So ecosystem-based adaptation mitigation are innovative and scalable approaches. Peer learning through practice, and applicable of inclusive and practical knowledge can transform capacity development, technology transfer. So again, we need inclusive knowledge. We need both traditional knowledge and modern knowledge. Co-management, co-production, and equitable sharing of adaptation benefits. The co-production of knowledge and co-production of benefits is very, very important. And this is what I think can transform our actions. And it can also transform disaster governance. It can disaster management governance, and also adaptation, climate change governance. And finally, you know that policy kind of drives everything. So you need to have good policy, not only just good policy, but having policy, but also good implementation. So evidence-based policy making enhances government, donor, and private sector finance to climate change adaptation. And I would say that finally, the nature and ecosystem-based adaptation, I think, have been accepted globally, regionally, and nationally. And locally, of course, these have been accepted all the time. So we should promote it. And nature, we have to actually respect and strengthen our relationship with nature. With that, I would like to thank you for your attentive listening, and we'll be very happy to answer any question. I will also check the chat box for the questions. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaki, for that very interesting, very informative presentation. So, in fact, today we touched on very important aspects which are not so different from each other, but two different perspectives. Actually, we are dealing with disasters and how to adapt to them, how to mitigate them, how to manage them. So we were talking about data, the importance of having ready, standardized, properly collected data and information, and also shared among all sectors of the society, so that we'll be ready to adapt or respond to disasters. And Dr. Kaki showed a different perspective, how nature can do the job for us if we leave nature to do its business. What we do always, and the main reason for these disasters is mostly anthropogenic. That is, we try to change the nature, how it works, and then we now are grappled with how to face the consequences. Whereas if we just leave nature to do the job, we don't have to worry about it so much. I mean, that's really the message that the whole presentations brought. But there are a lot of questions from the audience. So I would like to pose some questions to you, to the speakers today. Okay. There's a question, what is the paradigm changes related to the SDGs, climate change resilience and disaster reduction after COVID-19 pandemic in the world? And also the question continues, who is the owner of data when the sectoral data is exchanged among institutions? I think number one, we need to, I mean, there are two different things, I guess. So what's the paradigm change related to SDGs, climate change, resilience, and disaster reduction after COVID-19?
Okay, I can take that, Dr. Hemanthi.
Yes.
I had also responded in my chat box. The biggest paradigm change is globalization, as you all can experience, has really got badly affected because, and climate change, we had always thought mitigation is the responsibility of the developed world, and adaptation is what developing country like Sri Lanka or other country like Nepal should do. But I think paradigm shift was there in Paris Agreement that now it's a common but differentiated responsibility based on capability. So that paradigm now is crystallized because we have many, I would say, the foreign labor force who have come back. I'm sure in Sri Lanka also some of the people who are working abroad have come back. So I think localization has become a priority, and adaptation actually is a localization, local phenomena. And we can also say that SDG is also, I think the starting, SDG can also, SDG in fact needs localization. It is not globalization which will give us SDG. So I would say let's promote localization to conserve biodiversity, to adapt to climate change, and also to achieve SDGs. This is the paradigm shift, I think, which we need to accept. I was reading a NAP of Sri Lanka. It says that, and I'm sure your enhanced NDC also says that we will do mitigation subject to the availability of the global finance. But I think global finance now will be difficult. So we need to change this paradigm, saying that global community is going to help us with climate change. No, we need to do ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaki. And also, thanks for bringing to the table the knowledge that, nature-based solutions are as effective as engineering solutions. In fact, there was another question, what's the effectiveness of nature-based solutions against engineering solutions, and whether we could amalgamate these two together? Dr. Kaki, would you like to elaborate on this?
I try to present it. Of course, a lot of our engineers, environmental engineering engineers included, are very used to responding to disaster with engineering solutions, like building dikes and embankments and what have you. But you all have seen, and in South Asia, there are a lot of embankments to control flood. But they have created more problems than solution. Waterlogging, displacement of the communities, and of course, then if there is a breach on the embankment, then the huge loss of life and properties. So I think the notion that you can really tame rivers is I think is old-fashioned. We have to adapt to flood. We have to adapt to I would say droughts. So that's why I felt that the engineering solution, of course, immediately when the flood comes, perhaps in the urban settings, roads have to be repaired, and then the bridges have to be built, and some embankments and dikes have to be built. But I think without nature's help, they will not have sustainability. So use nature simultaneously to strengthen slopes, road slopes, so that you don't have higher cost of maintenance. So I would say these nature-based solutions do not rule out engineering solution, but they give primacy to natural solutions. For example, planting right kind of species, right kind of grasses, and of course promoting remaining forests, not destroying biodiversity. If you have elephant corridor or wildlife corridor, you don't really build a highway. You rather build a kind of a flyway and let the animal habitat be protected. Now, these are already accepted good practices, and this is what I was alluding to. And I have shown that in terms of the benefit cost ratio economic analysis, just the engineering solution gives very low return, or I mean, they in fact are causing more cost than the benefit. But if you combine it, then the benefit scales the cost. Thanks.
Thank you, Mother. Thank you for that answer. Yes.
Can I have a remark?
Yeah. Yes, please, host. Go ahead.
No, because it was a question between how can the nature process and the engineering process come together, and I just say we all know we have to observe what is going on in our world, and if you want to protect and you want to improve, then your first thing is to have an assessment of what is the case, and this is how we support. And there was a traditional way first to make a statement. Our world is like this. Now the paradigm change in recent years, let's say 5, 6, 7 years, on United Nations wording is that we have to care about the plans and the effects. We have to care about what is our future, not is only what is doing now, but what is our future or environment. And that is a paradigm change. What should be happening, that is what we are not really nicely prepared for. We have it in our head, many things, but it's so complicated that I say there is an institution or a typical structure missing. And I say there was one question about forest fires. Let me take that as one example. There is a global forest watch. There is global fire data information system. global wildfire information systems. There are global wildfire maps. Actually, I just looked it up, and there was not a single wildfire in Sri Lanka. You're very happy. But you see, that could also be the effect that not all the information is complete. I think that it also can happen that you have a wildfire, but nothing is mentioned in that global wildfire map, for instance. So that is a typical way where I say we are so far behind, even while we have, some people say we have a tsunami of information. No, let's go 5 or 10 years in future, and we have to deal, and we would be happy to deal with much more information that would not be only precise and reliable, but also maybe good for purpose of use and decision making.
Thank you, host. In fact, there are some more questions on data, which I will, direct at you. Who are the owners of data when the sectoral data exchange among institutions? And I'll proceed with the others. Any protocol available in the world for data sharing? Any protocol available in the world for data and information sharing and its preciseness?
Yeah, thank you for these questions. And that also shows that in the audience, we have colleagues that are rather aware of what is not so obvious and what we need urgently nowadays. Let me start from the question of owner of data. United Nations also always say, well, make the data public available. The public availability does not always is accessible, free of charge or so. So with all these principles that have to be put into the governance process of continuously observing what is going on in this whole, not just project, it's a process, a science, technology, administration, and civil society process that is going on, and that needs a permanent governance where these aspects have to go. Ownership is also there is something critical in that, because that may be kind of being blocked someday by what kind soever. And that is something where, yes, we have in Europe, we have European organizations. There's quite a number of states that put together their information in Copenhagen Environmental Information Center, for instance. There are large database systems, but we don't have the same thing in risk domain, and we don't have that in general sustainable development databases that go far beyond the typical environmental information systems. And that is what I say, we need that, and that is protocols is only the even if we lack them, the protocols is the formal data side, the information side of the problem. We don't have the institutions that take this mandatory task, how to set up a new institution or something like that. I said it for risk management in Germany. Do we have a sufficient large computer to do that? That question is open. You see, we have projects. It's nice to have projects, but how to put the result of the projects together and make that available permanently for operational use. Let's work on this together. These protocols, at least we have, I said, from the INSPIRE directive, that is technically down to the information level, where also the usefulness and the aspects of precision is documented, and in the Open GIS Consortium for the Geoinformation System. There are other initiatives like interoperability activities on global level, on national, multinational, and for instance, also European level, which are very active, and we have to draw knowledge from there. But it's not just the scientific data. There's advances in scientific data, but we are talking also about very operational administrative data, where a lot of administrative people have to work together with the science data and the decision maker sometimes are from the administration and in the political domain, not only from the science domain.
Thank you very much, host. In fact, that was really good. And I would like to ask you, I mean, it's not a question, but advice from you, from your wide experience and knowledge on data management, that in Sri Lanka, let's say the climate change, adaptation and mitigation, the climate change secretariat under the Ministry of Environment is the focal point in the country for climate change. And its partners are a wide variety of institutes representing sectors who are vulnerable to climate change as well as able to mitigate them. So everybody is having their own data sets, but we need to have a common platform, even to predict vulnerabilities. There has to be some standardization of the collection of this data and some standardized homogeneous set of data. And in this context, how do you think we should proceed in the country to have this common data platform, and also to share this data among the others, the partners and others, the users, the possible users, to move forward towards accurate predictions and taking accurate actions to adapt and mitigate climate change?
Yeah, thank you, Hemanti. In my experience, and several states already, I think, have installed such procedures that have to be installed cross-ministry working groups on high level, on management and on technical level. These in the final stage, where are these technicians from administration, from science domains, and from private sector? All these industries, fishing industries, agricultural industries, and whatsoever, we need their data. They have their data, or we don't use them altogether. But they should go in one table and sit together. The United Nations wording for this is having a national platform. This kind of construction of a national platform is that big part of the governance process, because all actors, not only those who make the decision, but also that makes the private decisions. What should I do for environment today, tomorrow, and day after tomorrow? All these actor groups are represented in national, regional or local even, and national platforms, because these national platforms, with their discussion, with their very, very near to political decisions discussions, they make clear what is the common knowledge, common need, and then decide on making some obligations for going forward, not just let it happen by projects. Sorry, there are different ways. It's necessary, and it's so important to have these projects. But how to go from projects to permanent operational work? That if you don't care for setting up such information systems nowadays, they don't belong to anyone separately. Information systems are distributed and they work together with interoperability standards. This has to be set up, and there has to be a governance for this information too. That is just my plea today. Set up something which governs the information situation, because it's not just the data, it's also decisions and actions have to be documented, and alternatives, because they are so interesting to read after decision, after action, sometime to read what decision has been taken under what situation and what have been the alternatives. What did we skip? Why did we skip? Which party was in favor, which party was not in favor, and so on.
Yes, thank you very much for that advice. That was well taken. Anybody who would like to, now that I think we have come to
හරි
the
හරි 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 ඒ ටික විතරමයි ඈ හරි එතකොට මේ බ්ලොගර්ස් පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්න ඕනේ වැඩි සද්ද නැතුව මෙයා කරගන්න කියන්නේ දැන් ප්‍රශ්නේ ඒ ටික බලන්න රැවල කොහොමද අර වෑන් එක පොඩ්ඩක් පරක්කු වෙලා නේ ගියා රුවන් මාත්‍යා
Okay. Mr. Premchandra, do you have anything to add?
I have very simple questions to Mr. Host Creamers. Actually, in data management, especially in climate risk and disaster risk reduction, so local information management is very, very vital. But any disaster is happening very locally, and impacts are very critical at locally. And I want to know whether there is a great, very successful information sharing model being practiced anywhere in, at least in South Asia, at a very grassroots level to combat these impacts. I forward my questions to host.
Yeah, thank you for these interesting questions. Yes, of course, we have to see that all these questions are from global level down to very local level. And if in the local level there are slowly ongoing disasters, there are rapidly very frequent disasters, and so on. All these need a different kind of information treatment even. So this is what cannot just happen. This is where I say we should be prepared. And this preparation from that management point of view of the whole process is a little bit poor nowadays in many states. And I also, there are the same discussions we have in Germany. So there is a lot of knowledge around. There is a lot of data around. But when you look into the details of the Sendai framework, for instance, and the climate information demands, then there's a lot of gaps. There is a lot of not usable or not directly in speed usable data and so on. People have to ask around. People sometimes, like in pandemic, they were registering data and send it by fax. Well, sorry, in Germany, this is not. It was a surprise for many of our citizens, but you see that if we have to be prepared, no one too much like to be prepared because disaster is far from us or something. This is not the case, and everyone knows today, and even especially our younger colleagues also attending today, I say it's your future, and we're telling partly what you should do, what you should vote for shaping your future in a much more transparent, reliable, and a caring way for you, your families, and friends.
Yeah.
Perhaps Madhav may have some experience on what Mr. Premchandra asked about these community level decision making data.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Premchandra, that's a very good question. Yeah, of course, with mobile technologies, now it is possible that especially in the mountainous context or hilly context, the people who are at the source of the disaster, for example, slope failure, or you have flood because of the kind of cloud burst or the extreme rain events, then immediately the upland communities, there are now even a mobile system where a level, when the river crosses the danger level, then automatically downstream communities get the warning. So this prototype has already been developed by ICMOD in Kathmandu, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. Local community, they operate. It has been operational in Assam, in some of the lowland communities in Nepal, so that flood warnings are of course, the Department of Hydrology, Meteorology gives national warning, but local warnings are given by local communities. The upland communities provides the lowland communities prior warning so that they are prepared and evacuated. So this also happens between the countries. Of course, data are sensitive. Sometimes sensitive data are not shared, but cross-border cooperation also happens. So this is possible. There are prototypes using mobile technologies. This is possible.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madhav.
Yes.
Professor, can I ask some other part of my question? Again, goes to Mr. Hoskremas. How can we integrate right to information and information management, data management? How can we integrate this right to information with data management?
Sorry, what information to integrate?
Right to information. People need information. Yeah. Right.
Okay. The right for information. You see, that is a good question. You see, so many years ago, there was a time I remember that where there was no right on information, on open information in Germany, in Europe. So I knew about the time and how long time and how many discussions on political and private and side there was to make a right on information on transparency principles, and that started in Germany, in Brandenburg. State in single federal states in Germany. Then after years we had a national law, and that spread because so many others were concerned about it, and then it became an international principle. Nevertheless, the question is, how is that implemented in every state, in every kind of governance structure or something? So this is something different, and sorry that probably you can indicate, but that is what we cannot influence too much ourselves, because it's your society decision of what to do. And this is integration of freedom of information is supported by the FAIR principles, FAIR, free, accessible, interoperable, and reusable information. FAIR principles defined by CODATA, actually, for the International Science Council, and for use nowadays as acronym for all these effects. Just these 4 letters are quite a number of work behind that for implementation, and but everyone hopes, yes, society pressure is sufficiently large. That cannot be only the pressure of scientists. That has to be said, yes, society wants to do like this, and we make a law for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the time is also getting on. So we had a wonderful discussion, wonderful 2 presentations, and a very animated and very informative discussion on the way to move forward with data, right kind of data, and right kind of attitude towards nature. So that's what we need, these things going hand in hand. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our resource personnel, Mr. Hoskremas and Dr. Madhav Kaki, for joining hands with us in delivering this webinar, which is the 2nd webinar before we have our annual general meeting of the Institute of Environmental Professionals. And I would like to also thank the Council of the Institute of Environmental Professionals, the President, the Secretary, Mr. Atugala, and Mr. Dr. Sampath Wahala, Mr. Trishan, and everyone, the President-elect, Professor Nirachali, and our Council for giving the maximum support to organize this and make this a successful reality. So thank you very much. And also, this will not be successful without the able participation of our participants, both national and international. We started with about 78 people. So thank you very much for all of you. And we'd love to say that these presentations will be shared with you. Host has already given a link to his presentation in the chat box. And also Dr. Madhav Kak had sent his PowerPoint presentation in PDF format, which we can share with all of you so that you can have access to this information. So finally, I would like to request Mr. Trishan to put this slide or two about our future programs and also about the institute and if you like, how to become a member. So this is our institute. So membership, if we would really welcome all of you to be members as appropriate. And if you go to the web, you can, web of the Institute of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka, and go to the relevant category of membership. You can download the application and fill it and send it as it is online too. So you're very well welcome to join the family of environmental professionals in the country as well as in the world. So this is the next webinar that we'll be having on challenges of waste management during COVID-19 pandemic. And this will be held on Saturday, 16 January at 6 p.m. So the registration is in the same website as this webinar. And you can get registered and then, you get the necessary link. So thank you very much, all of you. I'd like to wind up this webinar saying that, okay, together with the modern day facilities in providing the standardized data, which is required to make decisions, make forecasts on climate change as well as any other disasters for response and for mitigation, and the other perspective of just leave nature to do the business. I mean, that is another perspective. Together, I'm sure we can get over any disastrous situation by taking this attitude. It's the right kind of mind to just leave things and let it go, so that, do the development which only the nature can take. Don't go beyond. Thank you very much.